And then the screen at the end shows him running away from it. No, I don't think so. I think you just shot a bazooka at a nuclear missile. You're gone as well, you know?
Thank you for your sacrifice.
Welcome to New Game Plus. This is a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name is Kenny.
And I'm not Nolan.
And this is episode 453. Unfortunately, Nolan has joined the military. Fortunately, Garlisle is here as our third this week.
Hey everyone, nice to be back.
He's joined the military, but his stint will be just like a week long.
Yeah, hopefully, I think he'll be back. Or
Okay.
He'll be disbarred. I don't really know what it's called when
That's
you're
the term.
when you're kicked out of the military.
Yeah.
Garlisle, we are thrilled that you would step in and join us. You're known and loved in the community. Not only our retro recaps, but you definitely help out with those retro recaps that happen every 20 or so episodes. But you're here with us as a third, as you have been a couple of times before, so your vote really matters today. But before we get there, question of the week. What game was announced but never released that you wish you got to play?
Okay, I'm gonna go old school here.
How
Way back in the day, and I think I've mentioned this before, but it's okay if I have. People know who I am. Way back in the day, in the height of the era of old Blizzard, there was talk of a in StarCraft universe game. I think they were going to call it Ghost, that I believe was like going to be an MMO, maybe a shooter of some kind, maybe a shooter MMO, kind of a la all those that have existed. I don't know. I don't remember the details, but it was going to be a chance to be in the StarCraft universe, but not just in an RTS setting, but more like immersive. And that would have been amazing. They should still do it, or HBO should make a mini-series, not a mini-series, a full-on series, or there should be movies. I just want to go back to the StarCraft universe. It's rich, and we haven't spent enough time there.
Unfortunately, that was a day before Blizzard became evil, or at least before it was. Do you want Blizzard to still produce it today? You would. You just.
I mean, I'd still play it. I'd take the excuse. I get that like who Blizzard is today is different than who old Blizzard was, and whatever. But like I'd still go back. Like I'd love to.
A world of StarCraft, though.
Yes. That's what I want.
I don't know why they wouldn't have done that. I feel like that would have been so incredibly successful. It had to have been like, I don't know the history of that, but like the year of when it came out and like, I don't know.
Maybe. I think just MMOs may have been a little less popular and it was like a monetary decision, or they didn't want to like cannibalize themselves and they were trying to get WoW going again. I don't know. Who knows what the politics and the amount of time and money it takes to get a game of that scope up. But it was talked about. It was like a very somewhat realistic rumored thing, and then it never was, and I'm sad.
Garlisle, what about you?
I'm going to cheat a little bit and just say everything that died in 2010 when Capcom decided to stop making Mega Man. Because there was like, we know of like 6 different games that just got mass canceled in that era. There was Legends 3 is the famous one because its demo got canceled like 2 days before the demo was set to release. There was another ZX game, another Star Force game, an MMO that was in the works. There was going to be some just absolutely probably awful, gritty FPS reboot of the X franchise that got canned. And there was going to be a Mega Man Maker, basically, before Mario Maker was even a thing. And we just lost all of that en masse. And I still want to play all of those, as bad as some of them sound.
You want the mega pack of Mega Man games.
Yeah.
Mega Man would be perfect for a Mario Maker kind of game.
I mean, the good news is that actually was such a good idea that fans have made that a thing. Shout out to literally Mega Man Maker. It is a thing.
Oh, that's great. Hopefully they don't get put in prison. We are. I would love to play. I've never played Mario Maker or Mega Man Maker, but I have watched a lot of Mario Maker, and it's just so much fun to watch. I have an answer for me, and then I have an answer for Nolan since he's not here, but it's also for me as well a little bit. So my answer is dumb, and it's the meme, and everybody has said it, seen it, and knows it. Hollow Knight Silk Song.
I'm so glad somebody made that joke.
I don't. I mean, it's not a joke. I'd love to play it. I loved Hollow Knight, and I've learned in recent years that probably one of now my favorite, top 3 at least, genres or subgenres is that kind of like Metroidvania, and Hollow Knight does it so well. I just don't understand why there's not a Silk Song yet, but I'm not. My hopes are no longer up. Like now, I just believe it's not going to happen, and if it does, I'll be surprised. And then for Nolan, also for me, and for Kenny, the Elder Scrolls 6, whatever that would be called. Someday there might be one, but it's been... How many years has it been? It's been 15? Since
it's been a long time.
5? I don't know. It's been a long time since 5.
I remember it being a big deal about it getting announced a few years ago, but I don't think we've heard anything, yeah.
Yep. Nope. And it's because...
Some rumblings, but like it never...
I don't know if it's because... But when these companies get success with an online version of it, and I don't know how successful Elder Scrolls Online is, but I always think of GTA with this. Like, they have no incentive to do another one when they're still raking in so much more money off of this online evergreen kind of concept rather than producing a whole new one game. It's just... And so I feel like Elder Scrolls might have experienced that kind of doom death spiral as well. Will we see a 6? I don't know. I'd love to, but it's been a long time. These are games we'd really like to play, but it doesn't look like our wishes will come true. And if that's the way it's going to be, then so be it.
I was wondering what you do to us.
That's one of my new favorites.
I knew it would
love
be.
It.
Like in our retro game of the week, Russian Attack.
Overview.
Russian Attack. Not Russian. I don't. Y'all figure it out. Is a NES title that is a run and stab video game.
He's not wrong.
Known in other countries as Green Beret. They were robbed of one of the best puns of the 20th century.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. This is a Konami title. Originally came out in arcades and then was re-released on a whole bunch of different stuff. We played the NES version this week, but this came out on like everything. It was one of those that they were like, hey, it works in arcades, let's put it out. And so it's on arcade, like Atari, BBC Micro, Commodore 64, Famicom, like you name it, as well as re-releases later. So yeah, this game flooded the market when it came out. And like you would guess from the name, has some sort of Cold War-ish U.S.-Russian conflict at the core of your story. You're playing as a Green Beret who, in the NES title at least, is tasked with infiltrating a Russian base and stopping their new secret weapon, which, no surprise, is just a big nuclear bomb. Which differs slightly from the arcade version where you're rescuing POWs.
Nice.
And yeah, you do that as an elite commando armed with a knife and whatever else you find along the way, and nothing else.
It's either a run and slash game or a hack and gun game. No, hack and gun.
Hack and knife. Hack and stab.
Well, no, because there are guns. You need to combine hack and slash and run and gun. So
You're right.
You get to pick, but it's
It's-
either run and slash or hack and gun.
It's a rush
Can it-
and attack game.
I mean,
It's
there it
literally
is.
right
It's
there in
right
the
there.
title.
It's right there in the title. We should have known. So did you play on the NES or the arcade, or did you play on the Famicom Disk System or the Commodore 64 this week?
Yeah, I played on the NES. I think generally we did just for ease, but I know we had talked last week about possibly booting up MAME and playing on the arcade version as well. But
Yeah,
Garlisle?
I looked into the arcade version and all the other
Same.
releases and played the NES, and it turns out the NES is actually the most different one, but they're all very comparable.
Very comparable. I mean, Kenny mentioned the story difference between the arcade and the NES, but that doesn't fundamentally change the gameplay difference.
No, slight difference in weapon selection.
Slight, yeah.
And then there's some differences among like home console versions. The Famicom has some sort of like bonus areas that you don't get in the NES version.
Well, and the
although
NES has two more stages than the
we have
arcade
little
version.
actual stages that the arcade version didn't have. So small changes, but the crux of the game, the core of plop in your Green Beret elite commando and let him just like, run his way into the middle of this Russian base while stabbing everyone and saving the day is true across all the versions.
Konami wasn't the only one to do this, but they were really taking advantage of wartime propaganda.
I mean, everybody was.
Yeah, like this was the era of Rambo and stuff, making it big in theaters. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
1980s, you look at the NES catalog and like 1 in 5 games are take on the Russians,
I get it, but weird. We have played I think just two other Konami titles with a similar theme. We played Contra 3. We haven't played Contra yet on the podcast, and that would be more comparable, but we did play Contra 3. And then Jackal was also a military themed set around the same time. I
don't think it was Konami, but we played POW.
Oh wow,
which
yeah.
is again,
that was
like
way back when.
military. Yeah. Anyway, there's just a lot of games in this era that are military.
Well, and this felt a lot like some of the games we played before. POW is one of them. I felt, honestly, for a little bit, and maybe this changed, but I felt it was similar to Bionic Commando to some degree without the Bionic. I thought it was Rambo, but unofficial. And I thought that it was unacceptable that this game would be called Green Beret.
Because he's blue?
That's the primary reason.
that's true.
So,
I mean, in fairness...
no excuse. Blue
Okay, I'll give
Beret,
I'll
if
give
anything.
it to you. I'll give it to you.
There's not one Green Beret. Is the beret the hat, or am I just thinking something? Okay.
Yes.
No, it's the hat.
There's not a single Green Beret in the entire game, so I'm glad for at least us that we had it as Russian attack. You're really wanting to say something?
I
there, Ken?
really want to make a point of it, but it's not a big deal. It's funny, and I'll let you have your joke.
Oh, and you probably... we've already said, but this is still in the Cold War when this game released, right? I don't know my history that well, but I think this is probably in the later stages of the Cold War. Latest stages?
Yeah, this is... you wouldn't get a game named Russian Attack as a pun if it wasn't during this exact era.
You don't think one could come out today and people be like...
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, today people, I think, would be a little bit more just, side-eyeing.
Sure.
There's a reason in the first play this week I called it a special gaming operation, because Russia is in the news again. That's how it goes.
Oh no. We now have a bonus episode exclusive for those on Patreon.
Episode is not an over-exaggeration. It's a full episode.
And it's an episode that you get to be a part of.
Yeah, it's called Expansion Pack, and semi-regularly you get to be a part of the conversation. And we're going to debate, and we're going to scream at each other.
We're going to talk about video games. Yeah, we're going to scream mostly, though. That's kind of the point of it.
Yeah, we'll be like goats.
You roast us, we roast you. Find out more information at patreon.com/NGP podcast.
Gameplay.
In the NES version of Russian Attack, you have 6 consecutive stages where you are side-scroll stabbing, and at the end of each stage is a boss fight of sorts. Usually, kind of like a boss rush. You've got like a bunch of enemies that are coming at you, but that's really the setup, and you are faced with a small variety of enemies that I don't know if y'all thought about this week, but in my mind, and this is probably like mini games, but it's so much more evident here. This is just rock, paper, scissors. And the way that it basically, you only have these 3 options. So you have enemies running at you from both left and right, so behind you and in front of you, and they have different colored uniforms. Based on the color of the uniform, they operate slightly different from the others. So your basic color will just run straight at you, kamikaze style. If they're bright red, I think it's pretty much on every stage bright red, they will jump once they get close to you, and so you have to jump to meet them. And then yellow has a little bit more, it's usually yellow. It might be different on different stages, but it's a little bit they're able to climb ladders. Some of them have weapons or like get down on the ground, and so you have to meet them in those areas. But that's it. It's a rock, paper, scissors. Every time you come across one of those enemies, which you come across a lot, they'll endlessly run at you. You have to figure out, is it rock, paper, scissors based on the color of the uniform they're wearing.
You act surprised, but I don't know if you know how bad guys work.
That's
how it works.
They color code?
Yeah. They get up in the morning and they decide to put on a shirt, and then based on which shirt they're wearing, they do specific bad guy functions.
Yeah. I'm well aware. Nolan's finding that out this week since he's joined the military. I wonder what color he chose. Every once in a while, on a stage, there is a ranged enemy. So, like, someone that you can't necessarily get to. They're up in, again, I don't know my military lingo, but they're up in a tower.
Little sniper's
what they're
nest.
Sniper's nest. And they'll shoot down little, pea bullets at you. They won't pea bullets at you. They'll shoot pea-sized bullets at you.
It's a good clarification. You've got laser turrets at one point.
Laser turrets?
Yeah.
Where was there a laser turret?
In the
laser
levels.
stage?
No, it's like one area, but it happened. You're forgetting things or didn't get all the way through it.
I beat it multiple times this week in my sleep.
Well, then they're there. There's a few other ranged enemies, and you get sort of this progression of sort of basic enemies and basic patterns, and as the game goes, they add a little bit more variety.
Just
Not a lot,
a little
but
bit,
a little bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, your basic thing are those 3 enemies that I described,
right?
The ones that you're fighting.
The whole first level, you don't have to dodge a projectile at all,
unless
you count the jumpy guys, their whole body becoming a projectile as they fling themselves at you.
Or if you count stable mines on the ground as projectiles that Kenny you struggle with.
Okay, can we talk about these mines? This is 1980 something.
Okay.
I know the military is well funded, but it's not super smart at this point. We don't have landmines that can differentiate between good guys and bad guys. And the fact that the Russians can just swarm you and run over these landmines and have nothing happen, but you even think about getting slightly close to one and they go off, is not okay.
Okay, but that's not even as weird as the fact that if you shoot the landmines with a rocket launcher, the landmines will blow up, but not the rocket.
No, I'm all about these rockets. They pierce everybody. You can take out 8 people.
They just go through everything.
In fact, on my second run, I took my rocket launcher fully loaded into the boss or the enemy rush at the end of the first stage.
Just like one shot it.
You can use the 3 bullets to take out each wave that comes and beat the boss if you do it right. Because again, it doesn't explode on contact of enemies or of mines. It goes through until it's off the stage.
Yep.
So if you're fast enough, you can't be, but if you're fast enough, you could just follow the missile all the way through to the end of the stage. Which you might have just kind of gotten. It's one hit kill for anybody. So there's no health bar. It's that traditional arcade style one hit kill.
Which is always frustrating
Challenging
for me.
Yeah,
challenging
for
yes.
sure.
Yeah,
However,
at the very least, the game doesn't send you back when you die. It only
I was about
pushes
to
you
say.
back a little
True.
bit of the stage.
checkpoints.
Which helps some.
That's crazy. Checkpoints.
It's- I don't think it's actually checkpoints, because if you die right after a checkpoint, it will actually push you back further in the stage.
So
So
how
it's
did
just
they?
like a set amount of
Yeah, I
backwards
think it's just like a
progress
set
when it pushes you.
rewind. But that's still something.
For 1985, that seems super early to have some kind of something. I'm just used to these stages making you suffer. I mean, you're starting all the way back at the beginning of the stage. It was a little bit of help, to not put you back all the way at the start. These stages aren't super long, but any link that saves you is welcomed.
Yeah. Dustin, you said, you've got to fight these different enemies in different ways, and you kind of do. You're jumping and or like moving back and then stabbing when the guys jump at you. You're accounting for the stuff they're doing by reacting, and you need to react quickly. Thankfully, this game has very, very tight controls.
Yeah.
You can stab, and you can stab quickly, like as fast as
spam.
you can move that thumb. Like you're, like really just going at it. It's almost like, I don't know, one of those electric knives you get out once a year just to do the turkey. Like, bzzz, like you are buzzsawing that stab motion when you need to. But you can also like jump very quickly and flip around and like go down to the ground very quickly. And you need to, because there's bullets flying and people coming. And I just was very appreciative of the fact that this game didn't feel like floaty or slow. Like it lets you react quickly, and you need to.
Yeah.
I mean, it's responsive to jump, but they put the jump on the up button. And that's a problem with a
which is a
D-pad when
choice.
you're sliding directions from left to right.
I know this game, Super Smash Brothers, they all do. They all put up in the most weird place. I understand for this game, because on the NES and in the arcade you typically have two buttons, and for those buttons they had it stab, and then when you picked up one of your projectiles, but I particularly in this game, putting the jump on the up when movement is key here, and when there are ladders on the stage, and when it does not differentiate between your jump that you've already put in and attaching to the ladder. That was the bane of my existence. This game was the game deciding I wanted to climb a ladder when I didn't want to climb a ladder.
Yeah, it's super frustrating. I'm with you. I understand why they did it, and it, as unintuitive as it feels, it's relatively easy as you play this game a little bit to internalize that control. Like it still feels foreign, but like at first I couldn't beat the jumpy guys to save my life. And then once you learn the pattern of just like I can kind of jump and you can knife at the same time. You can knife in midair, which is great.
You can knife 1,000 times in midair.
Absolutely. You can that's the noise you're making in your head while you do it. Like that's, I don't know, it wasn't as much of a problem for me once I got used to it, but it is odd.
I want to talk about the different weapons that you can pick up, because that, in my opinion, this might be too brash, can make or break a game like this, because it is adding the flavor, it's adding the flair. The knife is fun, and that's a little bit abnormal, but there's other games that do a melee attack for sure. But adding in these temporary weapons, you have got, by the way, so you've got your combat knife at all times, but you have got some weapon drops from certain color uniformed individuals. They can drop a bazooka, which has 3 missiles, I think. The hand grenade, which I think has 4, maybe. And then you've got a pistol and a star. The pistol and the star are these temporary. Well,
Yeah,
they're all
they're
temporary,
more-
but they're timed.
Right. They're more a like short-term power up than like a item pickup. The line is blurry here, but feels more like a Mario star. I mean, one of them literally is a star.
Is a star for sure.
Yeah. I kind of actually like that with the pistol, weirdly enough.
The pistol's the best.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's strong. Like,
Infinite
these
ammo.
are waves of enemies that normally you can only handle once they get really close to you, and that's stressful. And you can just go to town and mow everybody down while you've got it. It's relatively brief that you have it, but when you do, you're living good.
The only thing I'd say about all of these really is that I think that the game is programmed in such a way that it's not like you're not getting I don't think you're ever going to be able to have the pistol on stage 1. I think it's like on a stage. I think the star is on a stage. I think the hand grenade and the bazooka may be a little bit more frequent, but I don't love that. Now, it is a shorter game. So maybe that's, they don't want to just let you breeze through, but it does feel a little bit weird when there's a power-up that they put an entire power-up in a game and only have it for one part of one stage. It just felt weird.
Yeah, it is all statically located. A lot of the enemies in this game are statically located, but the game will also send additional enemies at you if you try to just stall around and wait. But those will never be the ones that drop the weapons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know the in between there or the fix, but that's not my favorite. We did miss out on one of the arcade weapons.
The flamethrower.
Oh, the flamethrower?
Which is literally just the rocket launcher, but with slightly less ammo.
And then it does this animation on the enemies in the arcade where you see their bones. It flashes. It's kind of like electricity, but if you think about it with fire, maybe even worse. So, yeah, I mean, I understand why they would take it out for the NES family, family system at home, but that's a little missed.
You say that, and I get, again, NES was very careful. Reading through, like, old reviews of this game this week, one of the, like, initial reviewers was like, this game is so fun, but it's really violent.
Wow. How
just,
times
like,
have changed.
Yeah, our different, like, views of what equates to, like, violence in a video game that pendulum has swung really hard.
It is kind of worth remembering that, like, 1985, when this game came out on the NES, that was the release year of the NES. This is, like, first year NES game.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you think of it compared to, like, Ice Climbers and Super Mario Bros. And stuff, this would have counted as, like, a fairly violent game.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is cool to remember in terms of, like, the gameplay stuff, but also in terms of the look of this game. I know we'll get to that a little bit later in the show, but, like, they went hard here. As hard as they could for an early release title.
Are y'all good to talk about the bosses?
I mean, they're not really bosses.
They're certainly bosses. The music changes, it locks the screen orientation, and then it sends waves of enemies after you.
Yeah, and different types of enemies. Here was my question. The worst one, are they dogs or alligators or mutant otters?
They're supposed to be dogs. I don't think they look quite as dog-like on the NES version, but they were definitely dogs in the arcade.
Yeah, which also feels really bad. It's just waves of dogs that you are stabbing as they get close to you. Thankfully, it's not graphic, at least by today's standards. Maybe in 1985, they were like, it's too real. But, it's also super easy, the dogs in particular. You just crouch.
Yeah, that one's such a gimmick.
They all come from the right, and then they all come from the left, and then they all come from the right, and then they all come from the left. Yeah.
Well, we're smarter than dogs, so.
And otters. Well,
and alligators.
So the first stage, I think, are just the soldiers that you fought throughout the stage come in waves.
But a lot more of them, and includes some of the jumping guys. And so, like, it's tough for the first stage.
Stage 2, Rocket Men. Stage 3 are the dog otter gators that Kenny's talking about. Fourth stage is Auto Gyro. That's what it says, but
little personal helicopters is what it is.
Aww,
yeah,
little one-man helicopters.
5 is Parachute Troops. You can imagine what that's like. And then the 6th one, you're just fighting against the nuclear missile.
And waves of enemies that are protecting it.
Yeah, you have I think you're
who have the only weapon. Like, if they just didn't show up, you couldn't stab the nuclear weapon to death.
well. Did
So I
did
don't
you
know.
try? I heard that you could. I didn't.
Oh, did you? I'm just assuming no.
I assumed
because
you couldn't either.
The main mechanic was
Right.
like kill the enemies, get the
Bazooka.
missile launcher, and then use that to hit it a bunch.
Yeah.
I mean, call me crazy, but I don't think shooting a nuclear weapon with a missile launcher is a great idea either.
Right. Yeah, and then the screen at the
better
end.
than the alternative.
And then the screen at the end shows him running away from it. No, I don't think so. I think you just shot a bazooka at a nuclear missile. You're gone as well, you know?
Thank you
yeah,
for your
not-
sacrifice.
No, not the best. It does sound like, however, and maybe I'm jumping the gun, putting the cart before the horse, and other idioms here. It sounds like we all beat the game this week, and if so, I would imagine we used save states, which leads me to the question: when it comes to difficulty, do you think this game is, I don't have to give options, but easy, medium, hard, or do you think it is what we've discussed many times before, and we're not the only one to do so, NES hard?
I would say hard.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think this is quite NES crazy. The closest it gets is the whole, like, oh, you have, like, 4 lives and taking any damage. Any mistake will send you back. But, like, I don't know. It's usually not unfair. Sometimes you'll be jumping to take out an enemy and, like, another enemy will just run in off screen at the exact wrong time, and you'll be like, well, that was kind of nonsense. But otherwise, yeah, no, it's just on the tough side, I think.
I completely agree with both of you. It's definitely not NES hard. I honestly, what Garlyle you just said is exactly are exactly my thoughts. That it's hard, and I mean you can say unfair, but like a lot of the times, once you're in the air jumping, I don't think there's much control at that point. You've got to finish the jump.
You have
and
no control. It's Castlevania style committal jumps here.
Yeah, you yeet yourself
and so
into the enemy.
That's one of the only ways that I died consistently was because I had done a jump to take out one of the jumpy guys, and by the time I'm landing, another guy is on the screen. So at some point you're able to learn that, but like the first stage I can get through without any difficulty, pretty much without even stopping at this point. The difficulty does ramp up in a way that I think is fair. Like each stage does feel progressively more difficult than the last, but as long as you learn that rock paper scissors mechanic, and you are aware of the enemies that are coming on the screen or projectiles that are coming your way, I think it's difficult, but certainly doable.
Aged.
I mentioned it already, but I'll just take the excuse and go back there. I thought for the time that this came out and the type of game that it's going for, they've got this sort of, we want to be realistic looking aesthetic, not like a cartoony, aesthetic. That the graphics in this game were pretty good. There's a little bit of caveat there. They do some, like, again, because they're kind of going for a real world look, there's some sort of wasted space sometimes at the top of the screen that's like just the sky. But the assets that they put in are put together well, look good, shaded well, are very different throughout. Each stage you get different stuff. Lots of very detailed military props of various kinds as you're moving through this base. And even the guys themselves, I felt like didn't have some of the really goofy looking animations you sometimes get. There were moments that made me laugh, like at the end of the stage when he like is celebrating and climbs up the level and then like yeets himself off of the
over the fence.
over the fence, and it's really just funny, but that's more like, okay, this guy's a boss than anything that made me laugh. But even then, like, they gave him a whole custom animation for that. I was very surprised with how this game looked. Maybe just my expectations coming in, but I thought it looked great.
I didn't think too much of it, but like I said, then I looked at the year and I'm like, oh, right, this was NES release. Like, I'm used to things looking a lot simpler and like blockier and just not looking this good, especially in the backgrounds. It doesn't look like late NES, like that ideal sort of, this looks amazing. But for how early it was in the NES, it was actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, and the variety. Like one of the things they didn't have to do was change up the enemy sprites in between stages, but I'm pretty confident that in between each stage, they keep the same color scheme largely, but they change what the enemies are wearing. So like you'll go from like I don't it's just different uniforms. Again, they didn't have to do that, but they did, and it all works. You mentioned Garlow, I think both of you maybe, but the background art is what impressed
Absolutely.
me. The variety of it, like, yeah, they didn't just have like a Siberian wilderness, although they did. They had buildings, barracks, bridges, trees, jets. Like they had so many things, and they looked good for the NES. And then for 1985, like launch NES, they look really good.
The sizes of things were pretty realistic. I mean, obviously some things
Comparatively,
were a little silly,
yeah.
but like, like buildings versus people versus your huge missiles that are sitting there on the base. They did a very respectable job of giving you an action adventure. This is real life. We're going in and we're storming the base experience for what they had to work with at the time. And I thought they did great.
I honestly felt that the NES did it better than the arcade version, which that's not always the case.
Not always the case.
Like in arcade, usually a lot of times they have maybe I don't know, greater space assets, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, I didn't like the arcade style graphics as much as I did
as much as the NES.
With the NES. The NES is more simplistic, but I think that's a point in its favor.
Yeah, I think the backgrounds are actually surprisingly comparable, and that's probably why the NES looks so good, is that it was like, it had that to reference and pull off. I do like the enemy sprites better on the arcade version. There's a lot more, like, they're not just one color, they actually have like multiple colors and detail to the sprites and stuff.
Sure.
That's the main place where I think the arcade version looks better.
Sure. I did notice, though, a lot of flicker and slow down when there's so many enemies on the screen. Especially, you put one projectile on the screen and everything struggles. It wasn't debilitating, but it was present.
That's the specific thing that the NES struggles with, is if you get a whole bunch of sprites on the same horizontal place on the screen, and everything in this game is happening on the same horizontal plane, unfortunately.
On one line for the most part, for sure.
Yeah, it's noticeable. I didn't think it was too bad. And I'm used
not
to
game
it.
breaking. There have been some games where we're like, it almost ruins it, but you see it here. But
one of the things that I wish Nolan was able to be here to comment on, and I'm interested to hear Garlyle's thoughts on this. Guys, I don't want to be here saying this, but I'm going to be honest. The music is really good, maybe too good for this game. I don't know what they're doing or why they did this, but I got some Mega Man vibes. There were multiple tracks. Like there might be a dozen different tracks and larger tracks for stage themes, smaller tracks for boss fights and stuff. But there are so many different tracks here.
A bunch of them. They even
good.
put in some little like stingers, like victory end of a session, a level, music that was custom to just that level. One of them has like real patriotic music, and you're right, they mixed it up. Some games like this, you're like, they found a song and then they just play it all the way through.
Sure.
And a few of the tunes within themselves, unsurprisingly, are a little bit repetitive. Like on that level, it's playing, but not so bad that it's like frustrating. And I'm with you. There was a great variety here. The NES could only go so far with its sound font, but it made the most of it. And I was also pleasantly surprised with the tunes.
I'm not going to be quite as worshipful, but it was good. Like, it was definitely, again, for 1985, a little bit better than I expected. Konami was usually like one of the music giants. They figured out what to do with the NES sound chip. So,
good point.
like,
Absolutely.
that wasn't really a surprise. But these comments are specific to the NES version, by the way. Did you guys listen to the arcade version soundtrack at all?
Yeah. And again, it's just a place where I don't think the arcade did it as well as, like, it. their music is just like very tinny. I don't even know how to
Yeah,
describe it.
it's this really tinny like drum beat that I would have played when I was learning to drum in band class. Like,
Ooh.
just it
Yeah.
is the most basic, just military march style. It is honestly awful. It sounds awful because of the sound font they used. It just this is definitely a point in the NES version.
Definitely an upgrade. Yeah. And they threw in some additional things as well. There were some like not bad sounding like alarm sounds at the beginning of levels and some stuff to give you some kind of immersion beyond just the music. And I didn't feel like those were super annoying either. They just kind of added to the flavor of the game.
Now, I did expect you to say something, Kenny, that I haven't heard you say, and I don't know if you've thought, but on a recent game, and I don't even remember the details, you made the point that it wasn't thematic enough. It didn't feel like it fit with the context of the game that you're playing. I didn't necessarily get many Russian vibes here or Cold War music. I didn't get that here. I just got
you wanted
good
Tchaikovsky or something like what?
I don't know. I got good video game music, but I don't know if it was connected, and it didn't bother me. I thought it might bother you, but it doesn't sound like it did.
Didn't bug me too much. Again, if you try and go too military, I think you can run into the problem that Carla was talking about, where it's cheesy. This felt heroic and had some of that kind of military overtones, but without like leaning too into that. So it was more about like, we're a hero running in and saving the day, rather than like, you know, military operation. And it worked. It wasn't like one of those out of the blue, like this doesn't fit, but Nolan's gonna like it because there's a bunch of like drum and bass in it, and it like you know, it's like hype, but it's the wrong kind of hype. No, it worked just fine here.
Good points. The game does have 2-player mode, couch co-op 2-player mode, and we didn't get to experience that week. But it's I always like to bring up that it's more difficult to do nowadays than it was back then. Sure. You do not share lives, so that's nice. But it's basically the same thing, and I don't think that there is. It would be terrible if there was, but I don't think you can hurt, damage, or kill your own your friend.
I would assume.
But it's 2 blue berets, you know, running out and doing.
Quit
the same
calling
thing.
them blue berets. If one of you
She's
dies, I'm assuming you don't do the reset. You're just on that
spawning
same level.
right back there.
So that kind of helps with some of the progression as well.
Yeah. Well, and think having one take the flank, military, and one take the front.
Yeah, I've got
military.
your 6.
Nice. I didn't know this until the last moment, right before we were about to record, because it doesn't say it on the Wikipedia page for Russian Attack, but there is a sequel.
Yeah, there was. I think there was like a couple spiritual successors, and then like during the Xbox Live era, they actually tried to make a second game.
Yeah. So there is Russian Attack X Patriot that was developed by Vatra Games and published by Konami still, and that was released in 2011 for the PS3 and the Xbox 360, and it is set 15 years after, I think, 15 years after the Cold War. And it's a flashback that the player watches and learns that the Russians have discovered a previously unknown material that could create more and new nuclear missiles. So they've got to go, and someone's got to go in and take care of that.
So send in the knife guy.
Blue Beret. If you want a copy of Russian Attack for your NES, it's $8 used or loose. It is nearly $3,000 new and in box.
Must be a relatively rare title then.
That is a large gap. $8 or $3,000. Yeah, it's one of those crazy ones. I also looked up the arcade cabinets, which I was a little bit confused by because everyone that I found only has one joystick, but it has 2 buttons on the left and two buttons on the right. So maybe that you don't have the 2-player option at the arcade.
Yeah, the 2-player is NES only. To my
NES
knowledge.
specific. Got you. And it only it said that there was only like 483 or so arcades that were arcade cabinets that were released, which sounds super rare. but then it said that its rarity is not that, like, a lot of collectors have them. So I don't know.
That's because there's 14 people that collect arcade cabinets anymore.
That
That's-
sounds like a fun hobby to me, and one that is completely outrageous and not and unreasonable for 99.9% of the people.
Listen, if I win the lottery, I'll become an arcade collector. But
And then
until
I'll
then,
come-
it's probably not happening.
Yeah, it's yeah. You have to have won the lottery or live in your basement, which I guess that goes hand in hand with having a bunch of arcade games.
Final thoughts.
At the end of each and every one of our episodes, we determine whether or not the game gets our vote for New Game Plus status, which is our general thumbs up or thumbs down. It does require 2/3 of the vote to swing one way or the other. Kenny, what did you think of Russian Attack?
I flip-flopped my answers a few times throughout the week this week. Overall, I think this is a really solid little gaming experience. It's fairly basic, fairly short, but it's fun and delivers on what it's trying to do thematically. I did have moments where I got very frustrated with how much it wants you to play flawlessly. The one-hit kill thing can just be a lot. Maybe it's just my age, but like I'm not as on it as I wish I was on some of these fairly exacting games, and that can be a little bit of a buzzkill, and would take the edge off of this game, I think, for some people. However, the more I think about the game, it's nothing like mind-blowing or revolutionary, but for its time and how just well-rounded it is, and it accomplishes what it sets out to do, I think it's a game that's worth people being aware of. So know that you're getting into one that may have some hard moments. Certainly, it could use more weapon variety. Like, this is not a perfect game, but it's a good game, and it does the stuff it does well enough, and I had enough fun despite the difficulty that I'm going to give it an NGP.
Great. I'm not. I agree with a lot of the things that you said. I don't know if I flip-flopped in the week, but I was undecided for a lot of the week for a lot of the same reasons. I think technically there's a lot of good things that are in the pro column here. I think this game's flaw is that just in the gameplay, there's not much there. It's kind of the same thing. It's that
Pretty repetitive.
Yeah. It's pretty repetitive. It's that rock, paper, scissors thing. The boss rush stuff at the end, I don't know what I would have done differently. Maybe Kenny's development corner would have been able, if they would have talked to you back then, you would have been able to give them something a little bit better. But yeah, it's a good game. It's a fine game. It's a good game. There's nothing, absolutely horrid and wrong with it. It's far from a bad game. The soundtrack is good. But yeah, the gameplay itself is just severely limiting. And so while I had some fun this week, I think that's a limited amount of fun. And especially with only 6 stages, there's just not much here. 1985, it would have been a much better game. It's hard in 2024 for me to suggest that someone go back and play this one. There are other games a lot like it that take a step or two forward that I would probably suggest Contra maybe.
A Contra or something like that as the better version of a similar game.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fair.
So, while I get a lot of what Kenny is saying, I'm going to say no New Game Plus status for me and continue to be the curmudgeon that I'm turning out to be in my later years. Which means this is interesting. Garlisle, I don't know if you've been on the show before where your vote was the deciding one on NGP certification or not. So it's in your hands.
I'm going to echo you guys in a lot of ways in that, this game is overall, it's fine. There isn't really anything too horrendous about this game. But also that's kind of the problem to me is that, if there were things that were just utterly horrendous about this game, I'd be more likely to remember it in a month. This is kind of the sort of game that is this is fine, but there's nothing here that makes me go wow, I'm really glad I actually spent the time to play this. There isn't it's not the best in the genre. It's not doing anything super creative. It's just doing things fine. And so to me, it's hard to recommend go make time out of your day to play this. No, not really. the thing that's going to be most memorable for me for this is the first time I'm going to say no to a game's NGP status.
Oh, has everyone you've joined us with has been a yes?
Everyone's been a yes so far.
Trapped?
Yep. Even trapped.
Combo breaker.
Oh, nice, Kenny. Well, that means that Russian Attack is not New Game Plus certified. But what did you think? On our YouTube poll, 17% said yes, it's worth playing today. 13% said no, go play something else. 70% have never played it before. And that 13 plus 17 kind of amazes me that many people had known about it and played it at some point.
I mean, it was released on every system under the sun. Like,
True.
This 1985 was the era of, hey, you can make games for this, right? Cool, here's our game. Now finish a copy of it for this system in a week. It's like...
Yeah, that's very true. And it's Konami, so that probably brings it up just a little bit more in visibility. Many from our community played along with us this week and wrote in their thoughts. We'll include a few of them here. HSpice007 said, this game was okay. I used the crutch of save states to beat it for the sake of time, but as it was, it's a pretty short game. Not sure what the point of it was, though, being so short. I suppose it's just to keep trying to see how high a score you can get, as it keeps it, and you just start from the beginning again. It was a little fun, but I could see it getting old fast. The fourth stage with all the ladders was the worst annoying mechanic. Best thing about the game was the music. I was jamming the whole time, very upbeat, and they even threw in an invincible star. But otherwise, meh.
Yeah, I think the same conclusion I came to, really.
Fair.
The ladders.
Yeah.
That's what did it for me. Yippee NL said, I played the game on the original hardware on the NES. To be completely honest, I turned the game off after 10 minutes. It's dated, has little variety, and is just plain boring. I did look up on YouTube for footage for the arcade version, and this looks a little bit better, but is otherwise the same. Maybe the game was fun at the arcade in the 80s, but today there are better options for the NES. No NGP. This is a game that I think that I would rather play. Like, this is not one of those games that I'd probably go to in the arcade. This would be a game that I would rent and play on the NES back in the day. But arcade, I don't know. I think this is one that works better in the home console.
Ooh, that's tough.
Compacted D said, you get a pretty good idea of what this game is rather quickly. Bland. I think the visuals are pretty decent for the time, but the gameplay is boring enough to not be fun, and not bad enough to be memorable. At least this game predates most of the games Konami is known for in these genres. I'm glad they learned and made almost all of their future games better than this one. No NGP. Also, auto-snapping to ladders sucks.
I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that.
Oh, yeah.
And then Ken Gagney said, I first discovered Russian Attack in the arcade during the Cold War, and I still play it every time I see it in the arcade today. I love the not-so-subtle title, run and gun action, and variety of enemies. And the weaponry. I will never get tired of waiting for an entire troop of soldiers to unload from the truck at the end of the first level before unleashing a single bazooka rocket through them. Alas, a poor artist blames his tools, and that's exactly what I'm doing. I can never get farther than stage 3, thanks to the janky controls. Trying to climb a ladder, missing it by a pixel, and jumping instead? Terrible. There needs to be a separate jump button. Still, I give it NGP, and I look forward to New Game Plus playing the 2011 sequel, Russian Attack X Patriot, in a few years.
Yeah, I can see somebody having fallen in love with this in the arcade back in the day. Just specifically kind of back in the day. I don't think anybody would do that so much today.
Yeah. I mean, even outside of the arcade, if in 1989, 1990, you know, I had this game. I guess the longer the NES goes, the less likely I would have wanted to play this game when I had some of the other options. But at release, this would be one of the ones that, I would certainly have played. So thank you for sending in your thoughts on the retro game of the week. You can do that each and every week to ngppodcast@gmail.com or hop into our Discord. We've got a commentary channel there. We'd love to include your thoughts as a part of our episode. But for now, we're going to set aside Russian Attack, and we are going to randomly select the next game that we'll be playing for the next 7 days. Maybe Nolan will be out of the military and join us again. Randomizing now. We are only moving forward a couple of years from 1985 to 1988.
Okay. So, NES still?
Well, you would wish.
Uh-oh.
It is
PC?
ish, yeah, yeah. DOS, Apple II, yeah, Mac. It looks, yeah. It's an early PC game, also for Amiga, Atari, but it's Amiga and Atari, but yeah, PC, MS DOS early. Which good luck, Kenny. You're gonna
Okay.
have to figure this out for us, especially because it's Nolan's first play, and he's not gonna be having it unless you figure this out.
We'll sort him out.
It was originally released by Sierra Online, which is a throwback.
That just made me so hyped. I love the old Sierra stuff, generally.
Ooh, this could be something, all right.
It is a graphic adventure video game.
That's what they made.
And one of the last games that Sierra made with the AGI interface, and, oh great, is one of the most complicated. The game that we're going to be playing for the next 7 days, pray for Nolan, is Gold Rush.
Huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's California. Well, it's later retitled California Gold Rush. And
Okay.
yeah, so it's the game's set in 1848, so a few years before its release, the game's release.
If you had just told me that title, like not in context,
Okay.
I'd have been like, maybe an old like what's the one with the carts?
the one with the carts.
You know what I'm talking
Where
about.
you're traveling with
shoot
your family
buffalo.
and get dysentery?
Yes, exactly.
That's
Why
the Oregon
am I-
Trail.
Yeah, I would have pictured an Oregon
Yeah.
Trail style game.
Yeah.
But this sounds like it's something completely different.
Well, two
which could be
things.
intriguing.
One, people sleep on the Yukon Trail, which was a far superior version than the Oregon Trail. And then two, and I think the Yukon Trail, the reason why that came to mind is I think you're going to Yukon for gold. I think there's...
Oh, that may be it. That may even be
Yeah,
the
the
missing
connecting.
link in my logic jump of why I was like, that sounds like that.
And then two, no one, I don't think either of you have caught on to this yet. This is absolutely strange. Back-to-back games about rushing with Rush in the title. We played Rush and Attack, and now we're playing Gold Rush.
I
That is
guess.
The chances? 100%. Find a copy of Gold Rush, or later titled California Gold Rush. There was a re-release in 2011. It is a remake, though. I wonder how faithful, because that's going to be a lot easier if we can just play it. Can you please do the research?
If it's super faithful, that's all Nolan will do because just ease. But I'll try and figure it out.
Find a copy of Gold Rush. Play it along with us this week.
And hey, speaking of rushing, why don't you all rush on down to the Discord? Discord.gg/NewGamePlus. Come hang out with all of us and the rest of our awesome community.
You can also head over to patreon.com to support NGP. It's our Gold Rush. You supporting the show. That's a bad joke. We want to say thank you to those of you who do, including our newest patrons, Mitch, Jordan, and Dustin. Help me out with pronunciation. We just had this conversation.
Try it. And
No,
it's
I'm going to
very
get it
easy to
wrong.
remember.
Okay, Dagony.
Yes.
Yeah, because you corrected me. Dagony, thank you, and forgive my butchering of your name previously. Thank you, of course, to our director-level supporters as well, Brojim, Super Hybrid, and Siegfried, and to our many producer-level supporters. Couldn't do what we do without you, including Alex, Marley, and Antonin, Bill R., Ben, Craig, Dustin's 5 o'clock, Shadow, Garlisle, Hey, Guardian Cade, Hallex, Harold, Hey Brother, J. Robert, Jake, Jordan, George Binks, Justin, Glenn, Levi, Megzima, Megatroid, Miss Muso, Not Enough Dog, Radmac, Retro Man, Sagen, Sasser, Scotty Shane, Shauna, Snigmatic, Swaggy, Taco, Fish, Psychomantis, Thomas Tins, Turtle, Unbedavable, and Zion. We appreciate your support.
Garlisle, would you like to plug anything?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here with us today, filling in.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, no
We are
problem.
so glad that you're here and a part of the community. You can find more of us on our social media, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. The links are in the show notes. Listen directly on any podcast provider of your choice. Make sure you subscribe so that you're the first to get new NGP episodes. And while you're at it, please leave a kind rating and review. Our episode artwork was created by our friend Dave. Our video episode was edited by our friend Dylan. Our audio episode was edited and produced by our friend Dan Willett. Join us next week as we play Gold Rush. It has an exclamation point at the end. Please don't.
Gold Rush.
There we go. Until then, I'm still Putin.
Me too.
I'm too short of a video game to have a witty name.
And this has been New Game Plus.